The observation deck of Oblivion's halo shimmered like the inside of a gemstone. Light from 1,000 stars poured through the transparent dome above, casting shifting shadows over polished obsidian floors. Delegates from across the galaxy, scaled, feathered, armored, and robed, floated in magnetic shoes or glided across gravity pads, murmuring in 50 languages. It was the first day of the Galactic Accord Summit, and all eyes were on the newest, loudest species at the table, humans. And where was Earth's representative? Currently, swinging upside down from the ceiling, red and blue suit gleaming, while a cloaked alien woman clung to him like her life depended on it. Spider-Man adjusted his grip on the support beam and whispered, "Okay, your dad's got really bad timing." Below them, guards in black armor, 8 feet tall and carrying plasma pikes, stormed into the grand chamber. They searched with sweeping gestures, scanning walls and ceiling. The woman in his arms trembled but kept her eyes sharp. "I told you," she said through gritted teeth, voice rich and accented. Someone inside tipped them off. "I never should have trusted the diplomat from Krylex." "You think," Spider-Man muttered. "Next time, we use the back door, or at least text me first." The guards moved faster now, zeroing in on something. Heat signatures, maybe. Spider-Man wrapped one arm tighter around her waist, aiming a web line toward a high vent near the dome's edge. "Hold your breath," he said. "This part's gonna suck." He fired. The web hit. They launched into the air just as a blast of plasma ripped through the wall behind them. Smoke curled through the chamber. Delegates screamed. Protocol droids panicked. A neon blue siren flared overhead. By the time the guards turned, Spider-Man and the mysterious woman were already flying through the narrow vent shaft. 5 minutes later, the Galactic Media Consortium exploded with breaking news. Spider-Man KFGGT in compromising position with XELARANAER. Earth faces diplomatic key rises. Every screen on the station showed a blurry but damning image. Spider-Man crouched on a windowsill, mask half off, the alien woman holding onto his chest, her cloak billowing like a scandal in motion. Back in a hidden maintenance bay, Spider-Man paced. "Okay, deep breaths. Let's recap," he muttered to himself, peeling off his mask. "I showed up to represent Earth, shake a few alien hands, maybe avoid triggering an intergalactic incident. And somehow I've landed in a galactic soap opera starring a tyrant's daughter and a hit squad." The woman, still catching her breath, leaned against a crate of ion converters. "My name is Velisa Vox, and I wasn't trying to get caught with you. I was trying to escape my father's empire. You just happened to be in the way." Spider-Man looked at her, then at the blinking console behind them, then at the tiny tracking device stuck to the wall. His eyes narrowed. "Oh, I'm definitely in the way now." Far above, in the secure wing of the station, a figure cloaked in regal black armor watched the footage. His eyes glowed like molten glass. Around him, holographic star charts shifted to display Earth's location. "Bring me the human," said Grand Marshal Cawthorn Vox. "Alive." For now, Spider-Man sat cross-legged on the cold, metallic floor of the maintenance bay, his mind spinning faster than his web shooters could spin silk. Velisa, the woman who had just caused an intergalactic scandal by clinging to him like a lifeline, was pacing nearby, her long cloak dragging behind her like an unwelcome shadow. "We're in deep, aren't we?" Spider-Man asked, rubbing the back of his neck. The flickering lights from the console overhead cast strange, shifting shadows on his suit. Velisa's eyes were sharp, her posture tense, her alien features tight with anger. "Not as deep as you're going to be. You have no idea who you've just tangled with. My father, Grand Marshal Cawthorn Vox, isn't just any ruler. He commands the Third Armada, one of the largest military fleets in the galaxy. Your kind has never dealt with anyone like him." Spider-Man raised an eyebrow. "Great, so now I'm tangled with some kind of cosmic warlord. Can we please skip to the part where I don't get killed?" "Not if you stay here." She turned toward the control panel, her fingers brushing the edges like a pianist preparing for a final note. "We need to get out. We need proof." "Proof of what?" Spider-Man asked, standing up. "That your dad's trying to conquer the galaxy while I'm stuck in a diplomatic nightmare." "I got that part." "Proof of his war crimes," she snapped. "The galaxy thinks he's a hero, but he's building an empire on blood and lies. The peacekeeping missions he's sending to neutral systems, they're just cover for the real objective: domination." Spider-Man crossed his arms. "Wait a second. You're telling me you're some kind of rebel princess, but you're definitely not in a rebel outfit. This is a whole new level of drama." Vilissa didn't laugh. "You have no idea what it's like, living under a man who would burn whole systems to keep his power. I was part of his inner circle until I found out the truth. He killed my—" She stopped herself, her eyes flickering with something darker, deeper. "I ran. I had to." The words hung in the air between them like a thick fog, suffocating and heavy. Spider-Man leaned against a wall. "So let me get this straight. You run from your dad's empire, and I just happened to swing by at the wrong moment, saving you, getting caught, and now I'm being chased by his personal hit squad." She didn't respond immediately. Her mind seemed to be elsewhere, weighing the consequences of every word. Finally, she nodded. "That's about the size of it," she said, looking him square in the eyes. "You're in this whether you like it or not. The galaxy is watching. They'll believe whatever narrative Cawthorne spins, and right now, you're the villain, the human who seduced his daughter, who was involved in a secret rebellion. Everything depends on what you do next." Spider-Man couldn't help but laugh. A short, humorless sound. "Great. I've been accused of worse. But this—" He tapped the communicator on his wrist. A red light blinked, signaling the arrival of a new message. "Spider-Man," the voice crackled. "This is Juno Vega, human intelligence. You're in more danger than you realize. I just hacked into Cawthorne's system. He's already labeled you as a fugitive, a terrorist. You've got a bounty on your head. If you're going to survive this, you need to get out of there now. And I mean now." Spider-Man's grin faded. "That's bad, right?" Vilissa was already moving toward the hidden hatch in the corner. "The worst," she said flatly, "is yet to come." They ran, slipping through shadowed corridors, Spider-Man's suit blending with the walls as Vilissa led the way, her every step swift and confident. The station seemed to come alive with alarms, loud, shrieking warnings, echoing off the walls. Red lights bathed the entire station in an eerie glow, and the once bustling halls were now deathly quiet, save for the sound of their footsteps and the distant hum of starships in orbit. Spider-Man's fingers twitched, itching to fire a web, but they had to be smart. They were too far from any clear escape route. And with every minute, Cawthorne's forces were closing in. "You're on your own now." Juno's voice crackled again. "Good luck, Spidey." "Thanks for the vote of confidence," Spider-Man muttered under his breath. As they rounded the corner, a pair of guards appeared at the end of the hall, their weapons aimed straight at them. Vilissa's eyes gleamed with determination. Now or never. Spider-Man grinned. "Guess I'd better make it count." The sound of footsteps echoed down the narrow, dimly lit corridor. Too loud, too close. Spider-Man pressed his back against the wall, peering around the corner. He could hear the clank of armored boots approaching, the hiss of energy shields charging. Not good. Not good at all. Vilissa, beside him, didn't flinch. Her dark eyes narrowed as she checked her blaster's charge and slid her cloak tighter around her shoulders, trying to blend into the shadows. She didn't speak, but the tension in her posture was palpable. Spider-Man whispered, "So, what's the plan here? I've got a few moves up my sleeve, but we're kinda in the middle of an entire station full of armed guards. So—" "Sha," Vilissa hissed, her voice sharp but not panicked. She turned, her fingers brushing over a panel beside her. A small door slid open silently, revealing a maintenance shaft. Spider-Man gave her a look. "You sure this isn't a trap?" I've had my fill of traps recently." She didn't reply. Instead, she stepped into the shaft, her movements swift and sure. Spider-Man hesitated, then followed. The air inside the shaft was stale and cold, the hum of the station's systems reverberating around them. Spider-Man crouched low, the metal grating scraping under his boots as he adjusted his suit. "I gotta say, this is a new one for me. I'm used to dodging rent collectors, but military warlords. This is next-level stuff." Vilissa didn't smile, but the faintest flicker of amusement crossed her face as she led the way. "You get used to it. Now keep your head down and move quietly. My father's command center is a few levels below. We can get in, grab what we need, and get out before anyone notices." Spider-Man groaned. "You're sure it's that easy?" "No," she admitted, "but it's our only shot." The shaft sloped downward, and they moved faster, crawling through the tight spaces, the hum of the station's engines growing louder the deeper they went. Every few meters, Vilissa would stop, her ears attuned to any sounds beyond the metal walls. Every time she gave the signal, they stayed perfectly still, listening for the hum of a guard's weapon or the clank of boots. Spider-Man's senses were sharp, but hers were sharper. She was born to survive in this hostile, cutthroat world. Finally, they reached a vent near the command center, a large circular room filled with holographic projections of fleet movements and star maps. Spider-Man crouched by the vent, his eyes scanning the room. Vilissa tapped the side of her head. "There, the data crystal." Her voice was barely a whisper. At the far end of the room, a sleek holographic table flickered with glowing data. Above it, a projection of Catharn Vox, the galaxy's most feared tactician, hovered like a menacing shadow. Spider-Man's gaze flicked over to the armored guards standing nearby. "Okay, so I take down the guards, you grab the crystal." "No." Vilissa's voice was firm. "You take down the guards. I'll grab the crystal." He paused, giving her a look. "You sure you don't want me to handle both?" "You know, because I'm Spider-Man. I don't trust anyone with that crystal. Not even you," she said, her voice cold but not unkind. "You can save Earth, but I save my people." Spider-Man watched her for a beat, then grinned. All right. No need to insult me. Just remember, I have a habit of." Before he could finish, a blinding flash of light filled the room. The momentary dazzle of an explosion rocked the floor beneath them. Spider-Man's eyes widened, and instinctively, he shot a web toward the vent's edge, swinging them both out of sight as chaos erupted inside the command room. From their new perch, they watched as guards scrambled to their stations. Catharn's projection flickered, his voice booming through the chaos, giving orders. "Find them. Kill them both." The words were chilling. Vilissa's grip tightened on her blaster. "Time's up," she muttered. Spider-Man could feel the tension building. They were out of time. "Okay," he said, adjusting his web shooters. "Let's do this." The explosion had barely cleared when the first wave of guards poured into the command room, their heavy boots thundering on the floor. The holographic projections of Catharn flickered, his voice now a low guttural growl. "Seal the exits. No one leaves this station alive." Spider-Man's fingers itched, his body tensing as he watched the chaos unfold below. Vilissa, crouched beside him in the shadows, was already calculating their next move. Her eyes flicked to the flickering crystal on the table, then back to the armed soldiers rushing toward the far side of the room. "They'll be on us in seconds," she said, her voice low, urgent. "We need a distraction." Spider-Man gave her a grin, a glint of mischief in his eyes. "Distraction. That's my middle name." He pulled a small spherical device from his utility belt, tossing it lightly in his hand. "Prepare for some web-based magic." He slammed the device to the floor, and an instant later bright blue smoke erupted into the air, swirling like a storm cloud. The guards nearest to the device reeled back, shouting in confusion as the room filled with a dense fog. Spider-Man seized the opportunity. He fired a webline at the closest guard. yanking him into the air with a quick tug. As the man dangled helplessly, Spiderman swung around the room, landing behind another soldier, kicking the weapon out of his hand before webbing him to the floor. Velissa moved like a shadow, fluid and quick, her blaster flashing as she took down another guard. She shot a look at Spider-Man. "We're wasting time. Get the crystal." With the room in disarray, Spider-Man nodded, flipping toward the holographic table. He landed with a thud, his boots skidding slightly on the slick surface as he swiped the data crystal from its display. He tucked it into his belt without a second glance, already thinking 3 steps ahead. "Crystal's secure," he called over his shoulder, his voice smooth but urgent. "Now what?" Velissa moved toward the nearest console, her fingers flying over the controls as she accessed the station's main systems. "Now we make sure we get out alive." Another group of guards burst through the far door, their weapons charged and ready. This time, there was no time for webs or tricks. They were all in now. Spider-Man's eyes glinted. All right, round 2. He leaped into action, his agility unmatched as he danced around the soldiers, his webs shooting out in rapid succession. Each shot knocked a weapon out of a hand, trapped a leg, or sent a soldier stumbling. He didn't need to think, didn't need to hesitate. He was in his element, survival mode activated. Velissa, ever the efficient partner, was firing her blaster with deadly precision. She had no time for theatrics, just cold, calculated shots that incapacitated any guard who ventured too close. Together, they were a well-oiled machine, each move synchronized like a perfectly choreographed dance of destruction. But despite the chaos, the guards kept coming. More and more poured into the room, their numbers overwhelming. "That's it. We're out of time," Velissa said, her voice strained but determined. She glanced toward Spider-Man. "The hangar's on the other side of this hall. If we can get to the ship." "I know the drill," Spider-Man interrupted, already launching another web at the ceiling, swinging them both toward the nearest exit. The moment they hit the hallway, more soldiers emerged from the shadows, weapons raised, blocking their path. Spider-Man landed in front, his body tense, ready for the fight. Velissa slid into position beside him, her face set in grim determination. Hatharn's voice blared through the station's intercom. "Do not let them escape. Crush them." Spider-Man's eyes narrowed, his fists clenching. He's a big talker. Let's see if he can back it up. With a snap of his wrist, Spider-Man launched his webs forward, catching the nearest guard by the throat, swinging him into the others. The pileup created a momentary opening. Velissa took it, darting past him toward the hangar doors at the end of the hall. Spider-Man followed, but the noise of approaching reinforcements told him they didn't have much time. He fired another web, pulling the door open just wide enough for them to squeeze through. As they bolted into the hangar, the unmistakable roar of a military starfighter could be heard, its engines firing up. "Looks like we've got company," Velissa muttered, already scanning the room for their escape route. "Yeah," Spider-Man said, his grin returning. "But I'm really good with company." The hangar was alive with the deafening whine of engines powering up. Spider-Man could feel the heat from the glowing exhaust of the military starfighter as it shot past him, hovering just above the ground. Its sleek, obsidian hull gleamed under the harsh lights of the hangar, a reminder that they weren't just being chased by random soldiers anymore. They were being hunted by Cawthorn's elite. Spider-Man's eyes flicked to Velissa, her face set with grim determination. "This is where the fun starts, huh?" She didn't answer, her gaze fixed on the distant exit at the far end of the hangar. The space was massive, but it was quickly becoming a trap, the kind that had only one way out, and that way wasn't looking so clear anymore. "We need to get to the shuttle," Velissa said, her voice clipped, her eyes scanning for an escape route. "We'll never make it if they lock us in here." Spider-Man didn't argue. He knew the stakes. His mind was already working, mapping out their escape plan in milliseconds. He pointed to a small, unmarked ship tucked into the corner of the hangar. Its sleek design was more utilitarian than the combat ships, a perfect choice for a quick getaway. Got it. We just need to get there before they do. Velissa moved first, her long strides echoing in the vast space. Spiderman followed, keeping his senses sharp, his webbed shooters ready. Behind them, the soldiers regrouped, positioning themselves between the two of them and their goal. The space around them was alive with motion, shouts, and the hiss of weapons charging. Spiderman didn't hesitate. With a quick flick of his wrist, he fired a web line at the nearest soldier, pulling the man off his feet and sending him crashing into a row of crates. A second web shot out, wrapping around another soldier's arm, yanking him off balance. "Not today, pal," Spiderman yelled, diving into a roll and coming up on his feet, ready to face the next wave of enemies. His muscles were on fire, but the adrenaline kept him moving, kept him focused. Velissa, right on cue, fired a shot at another group of guards, sending them scattering in a cloud of smoke and sparks. "Keep moving," she shouted, not waiting for him. They were only a few dozen meters from the shuttle now, but with every step, the sound of approaching soldiers grew louder, more urgent. Spiderman could hear the heavy boots of armored troops as they swarmed in from the side corridors, blocking their only exit. "You're starting to really ruin my day," Spiderman muttered under his breath, eyes darting for a solution. Velissa's hand shot out, catching his wrist as she pulled him toward a nearby storage alcove. "This way. We'll make a break for it on my signal." Spiderman nodded, but the situation was worsening. The hangar's doors were beginning to close, sealing them inside, and more ships were taking off from the launch pads, the space above now a chaotic mess of thrusters and blinking lights. The sound of energy blasts filled the air as more soldiers closed in. A shot grazed Spiderman's arm, sending a jolt of pain through his body. His eyes flicked to the damage, a small burn mark on his suit, but he barely registered the pain. There was no time for that. "Now," Velissa ordered, and without hesitation, they broke from their cover, charging toward the shuttle. The distance between them and the ship seemed to stretch, every step feeling like a lifetime. Spiderman could see the hangar doors closing slowly, the weight of their escape pressing down on him. Just as they neared the shuttle, the ground shuddered beneath them. A massive explosion ripped through the far side of the hangar, sending debris flying into the air. The shockwave hit them like a tidal wave, knocking them both off balance. Spiderman shot out a web line, catching a nearby crate to steady himself. "Velissa," he shouted, spotting her a few feet away, getting to her feet. "I'm fine," she said, her voice steady, though her eyes were wild with the urgency of the situation. "We don't have much time. Go." Spiderman didn't waste another second. He fired a web at the shuttle's rear hatch, pulling it open with a forceful yank. Inside, the controls were sleek, minimalistic, just enough to get them out of there. Velissa climbed in, already activating the systems. "You drive. I'll handle the defense." Spiderman took the pilot's seat, hands flying over the controls. The engines hummed to life, and the hangar's exit began to open with a screeching sound. But they weren't in the clear yet. Spiderman hit the throttle, pushing the shuttle into motion, just as a dozen armed soldiers rushed toward them. The shuttle roared into the air, narrowly avoiding a flurry of blaster fire. Spiderman banked hard to the left, weaving through the debris in the hangar. The doors behind them slammed shut with a metallic clang, but the soldiers had no intention of letting them go. The chase had just begun. The shuttle jerked forward, its engines roaring to life as the hangar's doors slammed shut behind them, trapping the pursuing soldiers in a cloud of smoke and debris. Spiderman's hands gripped the controls with white-knuckled intensity, his eyes darting to the readouts on the dashboard. The shuttle systems hummed, but it wasn't fast enough. Not nearly. Behind them, the roar of fighter jets filled the air, their engines screaming as they shot into pursuit. Kafarn's forces weren't playing games anymore. They were coming for blood. "Can you outrun them?" Velissa's voice cut through the tension, calm despite the chaos. She was already on the turret, her blaster aimed at the rear window, scanning for incoming targets. "We can't outrun them in a straight line," Spider-Man muttered, flipping a switch that sent the shuttle into a sharp left bank. He yanked the throttle up, the shuttle diving toward the station's lower levels, where thick clouds of ionized debris obscured their path. Velissa's eyes narrowed. "Then we'll make them play catch-up." She fired a round at one of the incoming fighters, the shot grazing its wingtip. It veered off course, but another jet quickly took its place. Spider-Man grinned. "This is the part where I show off." With a flick of his wrist, he pulled the shuttle into a sharp roll, flipping the ship upside down and then back right side up with a deft maneuver that left the pursuing fighters a half-second too late. The jet shot past them, narrowly avoiding a collision. "Nice moves," Velissa called out, her voice filled with approval. "Glad you like it," Spider-Man said, his eyes already scanning for their next move. The station's layout was chaotic, full of narrow lanes, industrial zones, and debris fields. He knew he had one chance to make it out. One mistake, and they were toast. A warning light flashed on the console, followed by a shrill alarm. "We've got incoming," Spider-Man shouted, but Velissa was already ahead of him. She fired another blast from the turret, hitting the lead jet's rear engine. Sparks flew from its engine, and the fighter veered wildly, out of control. The pilot ejected, but the jet crashed into a nearby industrial platform, sending a plume of smoke and fire into the air. But there were more. Far more. The remaining fighters were relentless, and they were closing in fast. Spider-Man's heart pounded as he pushed the shuttle's speed to the limit, weaving through debris and flying at dangerous angles. The fighters were skilled, but Spider-Man was faster, and the station's narrow corridors were his playground. He aimed the shuttle straight for a massive industrial tower, its spires reaching up into the atmosphere. The fighters followed, assuming he was making a break for it. But Spider-Man had other plans. "Hold on," he shouted, yanking the controls hard to the right. The shuttle slammed sideways through a narrow gap between two massive reactor cooling towers, barely avoiding a collision. Velissa's teeth clenched, but she didn't make a sound. She was ready. Spider-Man's mind raced. If they could just make it to the open space on the far side of the station, they could make the jump to hyperspace. But that was a big if. The station's defense systems were active now, and it wouldn't be long before they called in reinforcements. Spider-Man's gaze flicked over to the console, noting the incoming fighter formation. They had to break through before it was too late. "Velissa, we need to lose them," he shouted. Velissa's hand was already on the emergency flare controls. On it. She triggered the flare, sending a bright red signal shooting into the atmosphere. The flares exploded like fireworks, drawing the attention of the fighters for a crucial second. It was just enough. Spider-Man grinned. Perfect timing. The moment the fighters diverted, he twisted the shuttle into a hard barrel roll, dodging a volley of laser fire that followed too closely. The shuttle's rear thrusters roared as they rocketed toward the station's outer edge. They were almost there, just a few hundred meters from the open space that would let them escape to hyperspace. But the final fighter was still on their tail, relentless and faster than the others. It closed in, weapons primed. "Velissa, now." Without hesitation, she swung the turret around, firing directly at the fighter's engines. The shot hit dead center, and for a moment, the fighter shuddered, its systems flickering. It was all the time Spider-Man needed. He yanked the shuttle's nose up, pulling them into the stars just as the fighter's engines exploded in a flash of fiery debris. The open expanse of space stretched out before them, a sea of infinite darkness dotted with distant stars. Spider-Man exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "We made it," he muttered, still gripping the controls with tense hands. Velissa collapsed into the seat beside him, her face pale but determined. The stars stretched out before them, vast and cold, as the shuttle coasted through the darkness. The thrusters hummed low, their soft vibrations a constant reminder of how close they were to the edge of safety. The hyperspace jump was still moments away, But Spider-Man couldn't shake the feeling that the calm in the cockpit was only temporary. Velissa was already at the nav console, her fingers flying over the keys as she scanned their surroundings. The data crystal lay on the dashboard, a small, unassuming object that had already brought them this far into the fire. "We need to stay ahead of Cawthorn's fleet," she said, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. "If we make the jump now, we risk being tracked." Spider-Man leaned back in his seat, a slight smirk on his lips as he observed her. "So we're not running yet? I thought you were the cautious type." Velissa didn't look up from the console. "I'm not running, Spider-Man. I'm planning." She tapped a few more keys, bringing up a star map on the screen. The system they were in was unfamiliar to Spider-Man. No galactic highways, no well-worn trade routes, just barren space and the occasional asteroid belt. Their only chance was to stay off the grid, but the longer they waited, the more likely they were to be found. "You're really not liking the odds, huh?" Spider-Man asked, glancing over at her. His tone was light, but he was beginning to sense her unease. "We don't have a choice," Velissa replied, still staring at the map. "We need to reach the outer systems, find a way to." Suddenly, a loud beeping cut through the air. The console flashed red, warning lights blinking in rapid succession. Spider-Man's eyes snapped to the readout, his pulse quickening. "We've got company," he muttered under his breath. Velissa was already reaching for her blaster, eyes hard with resolve. More of Cawthorn's ships. Spider-Man's gaze flicked back to the screens. In the distance, a small fleet of ships was emerging from the debris field they'd passed moments ago. They were smaller than the fighters they'd faced earlier, but there were too many. And they were closing in fast. "Not good," Spider-Man said, his hand already reaching for the control lever. He adjusted their trajectory, bringing the shuttle into a sharp bank to the left, narrowly dodging a volley of plasma blasts that sizzled past the side of the ship. "We can't outrun them at this speed," Velissa said, her tone clipped. "They'll have us boxed in if we don't fight back." Spider-Man exhaled sharply, his mind working quickly. He glanced at the rearview display, watching as the enemy ships spread out in a calculated formation, cutting off every potential escape route. He had no choice but to make a stand. "We're gonna need a miracle," he muttered. "Then get to work." Velissa shot back, her fingers already tapping into the shuttle's weapon systems. Spider-Man fired up the shield generator as Velissa activated the ship's weapons. The shuttle trembled under the sudden surge of power, but it was enough to give them a fighting chance. "We're about to get up close and personal," Spider-Man said, flashing a grin at Velissa. "You ready for this?" "Always," she replied, her eyes narrowing as she aimed the turret at the incoming ships. The first round of plasma fire came from the enemy fleet, splintering against the shuttle's shields with a deafening crack. Spider-Man jerked the controls, rolling the shuttle hard to the right, sending it into a spiraling, evasive maneuver that barely avoided another wave of fire. "Nice moves," Velissa said as she fired back, her shots finding their mark on the lead ship, its engine sputtering as it began to spiral out of control. But the remaining ships weren't backing down. They continued their relentless assault, moving in tight formation, closing in with deadly precision. "Think you can give us an opening?" Velissa asked, her voice calm, but with an edge of urgency. Spider-Man's fingers danced over the controls. "I think it's time to get creative." With a sudden shift in strategy, he pulled the shuttle into a sharp dive, sending them spiraling toward an asteroid cluster on the edge of the debris field. The enemy ships followed, their fighters hot on their tail. Just as they neared the asteroid field, Spider-Man hit the thrusters, slamming the shuttle upward in a sudden, unexpected ascent. The pursuing ships were too locked into their pursuit to adjust quickly enough. One ship collided with an asteroid, bursting into flames in a flash of orange. "That's one down," Spider-Man muttered, a rush of adrenaline surging through him. The asteroid field stretched out before them, a maze of jagged rocks and spinning debris. The shuttle shuddered, its hull groaning as it barely avoided the deadly obstacles in their path. Spider-Man's hands tightened on the controls, his eyes darting between the various readouts, his senses on full alert. They were running out of time. The enemy ships were still on their tail, relentless as ever, and they were closing the gap with each passing second. "They're not letting up." Velissa's voice rang through the cockpit, sharp with urgency. She was firing off shots from the rear turret, each blast finding its mark, but it wasn't enough to stop the pursuing fleet. "We can't keep dodging forever," Spider-Man muttered under his breath, his pulse racing as he calculated their next move. His mind was firing on all cylinders, trying to find any advantage. They were boxed in by the asteroid field, no clear path ahead. One wrong move, and they'd be pulverized. The first of the enemy ships broke through the asteroid barrier, swerving wildly to avoid an impact. It was a sleek, black fighter, and its pilot was skilled. Too skilled. Spider-Man pulled the shuttle into a hard left, the engines screaming as they pushed for speed. The hull vibrated under the pressure, but the shuttle responded, leaping forward through the narrow gap between two massive asteroids. "Hold on," Spider-Man shouted, leaning into the turn. The shuttle bucked violently, twisting as the gravitational pull from the asteroid shifted, but it was too close, too tight. Another ship followed them into the gap. It was a larger, more armored vessel, and it didn't hesitate. Spider-Man barely had time to react before it fired, sending a plasma bolt tearing past the shuttle's side, scraping the hull with a shower of sparks. Spider-Man cursed under his breath. Not good. Velisa, her jaw clenched with determination, turned back to the turret. "I'll give you cover. Just get us out of here." Spider-Man nodded, but the truth was, they couldn't keep running. They needed to make a break for it, and they needed to do it now. "Velisa, get ready," Spider-Man said, his voice low but steady. "We're going for it." With a sudden shift in strategy, Spider-Man throttled the shuttle forward, pushing it into the heart of the asteroid field. He knew the only way out was to take a risk. If they could get close enough to one of the larger asteroids, the gravity wells might help them break through the pursuing ships. But it was a long shot. The shuttle tore through the field, weaving between rocks with impossible speed. The enemy ships were right on their tail, their weapons charging for the next barrage. "Ready to fire?" Spider-Man asked, his eyes darting between the redouts and the asteroid looming ahead. "Whenever you say," Velisa replied, her hand steady on the trigger. As the shuttle reached the point of no return, Spider-Man slammed the control lever forward. The shuttle rocketed toward the massive asteroid ahead, its thrusters flaring. "Hold on tight," Spider-Man yelled. The shuttle lurched forward, and just as they neared the asteroid's gravitational field, Spider-Man slammed on the emergency brakes. The shuttle skidded, its hull screeching as it barely caught the asteroid's pull, sending them hurtling in an unpredictable orbit. The enemy ships, following too closely, found themselves trapped in the same gravity well. One ship slammed into the asteroid's surface, its engine exploding in a flash of light. "We did it," Velisa shouted, a breath of relief escaping her lips. But the danger wasn't over. There were still more ships. The larger fleet was closing in from the other side, and they were running out of options. Spider-Man's eyes narrowed. He reached for the data crystal, activating its encoded coordinates. There was one last place, one place where they might be safe. He hit a button, initiating the hyperspace jump. The ship's engines hummed with power, and before the enemy ships could react, the shuttle blasted into the black void of hyperspace. For a moment, everything was silent. Spider-Man leaned back in his seat, feeling the weight of the escape settle in. The stars outside were no longer distant. They were stretched out in every direction, a blur of light as they traveled faster than the eye could see. Velisa exhaled slowly, her face still pale, but with a hint of relief. "That was too close. You sure we're safe?" "For now," Spider-Man said, his voice calm but with an edge of uncertainty. "But Cawthorn's not the type to give up. We've just bought ourselves some time." Velisa smiled faintly. "Time's all we need." As the shuttle hurtled through hyperspace, Spiderman glanced over at her. They weren't out of the woods yet, but they had made it. And in this galaxy, sometimes survival was the biggest victory.